who are global leaders in the low-cost space. The names you might be familiar with: Southwest in America, EasyJet, Ryanair in Europe, said our success is because we only fly short haul. Long haul doesn't work. The people who've tried to do low-cost long haul have all spectacularly failed. From Sir Freddie Laker in the 70s in the UK, tried, went bankrupt. People Express in the US in the 80s, tried, went bankrupt. Some names more recently in the last few years, you might have heard Oasis Hong Kong, Viva Macau, Zoom, MaxJet, EOS, Silverjet, XL Airways, all tried and went bust. So nobody believes. In fact, even AirAsia said it cannot be done. That's why AAX had to be set up as a separate company. Because Tony himself said, there must be a way of doing this to make flights more affordable. But the board of directors of AirAsia, the shareholders of AirAsia said, no, too risky. Right? They said the low-cost model only works when you use small planes flying short distances. That's an end of story. So we had to create a separate company, AAX. We had to get our own license from all the governments to operate as an airline. We cannot ride on any of AirAsia's licenses. We had to raise our own funding. Right? So we had to go and get private equity investors, which we finally managed to bring in some crazy people like Richard Branson, Japanese shareholders, Middle Eastern shareholders. So the shareholders of AirAsia is actually very different. So as a separate company, we entered into a long-term agreement, a 30-year agreement with AirAsia to license the use of the AirAsia brand and the AirAsia.com website. It's actually a completely separate company, separate license, separate organization, separate capital. And the reason for that, as I said, was because AirAsia didn't believe in this model. It was too risky. Right? So sometimes, okay, Karen. Oh, it's okay. I can just use the arrow keys, no problem. Don't worry about it. Probably easier. There's more place to move the mouse around. The arrow keys are fine. So that's the context and landscape, right? When we started doing this. On top of that, so basically people said you're crazy. You're crazy to first of all start an airline because the airline industry has a successful track record of consistently being long-term value destroyers. That means airlines generally over a long-term period cannot earn a return on their cost of capital. So airlines not good business. In fact, Warren Buffett used to say, do you know how you can be a millionaire? You know how you can be a millionaire? Start with $1 billion and then start an airline. Okay? So crazy business. And then you're crazy to start an airline with only one plane. AirAsia actually had only one single aircraft for the first entire 12 months of operations. When we flew to the Gold Coast in 2007, only one thing. That's all we had. You're crazy to start a low-cost long-haul model which is unproven and everyone else who's tried it around the world have failed. And the British tried and failed, the Americans tried and failed. Well, excuse me, you Malaysians, you know better than the British and Americans. Right? And then on top of that, you're even crazier. You're flying to Gold Coast. It's a small, tiny city, a town, seasonal traffic, holiday traffic. How are you going to fill a big, wide-body plane 365 days of the year? You guys are nuts. Well, one of the things coming out from this experience has been basically for me learning that the traditional rules that people tell us this is how things are going to work no longer apply. In fact, I would say, I don't know whether any of you study management or business. Anyone? Okay. Well, they say, right, you're supposed to have strategic plans. You do a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan. Malaysians, we love plans. We have 20-year plan, 5-year master plan this, master plan that. Right? Plans, what we've learned, actually don't mean much. And there's in fact a real danger to it. In fact, Forget about 3-year plans, 5-year plans. A 12-month annual plan, or what we sometimes call a budget, is also, in my mind, irrelevant. It is obsolete. Why? Because the world that we live in today changes so fast that by the time you're into, 1st April, all your assumptions are gone, right? Because there can be either big global turmoil, such as a global financial crisis. We thought, just take fuel prices alone, right? 2008, who would have predicted fuel prices to go all the way up and then crashing from $140 to $30 in early 2009. And then after that, 2010, it started jumping up again to about $93. And 2011, Arab Spring, $120. We thought, okay, by the time Egypt is settled, Libya settled, will oil price settled? No. Now got new stuff. Iran coming up. Right? So oil prices now even higher, $130. Right? It's completely unpredictable. So you can have those kinds of uncertainties. You can have technological uncertainties. The pace of technology today. How many of you today use Facebook? How many of you used Facebook 5 years ago? Right? Today, you can hardly live without Facebook. Right? You probably like MySpace, right? But again, think about technology. Maybe before your time, but Nokia was once upon a time the undisputed market leader for mobile phones. Look at where they are today. Before that, everybody thought BlackBerry, wow, this is the best invention. Today, BlackBerry, record losses, change in management, change in strategy, completely obsolete. That's the pace of technology, it's the pace of change that's happening. Then, you've got consumer preferences changing very fast. When we first started to China, everybody said, in China you have to work with travel agents. And in fact, at that time, the first flight to Hangzhou, 50% of our business was with travel agents, because many Chinese first-time travelers, they need to work with a travel agent to get visas, to understand how to travel, and they like to travel by groups. To follow the guy with the flag. That's how the Chinese used to fly. Today, in 4 years, that has completely changed. The number of people from China who book on AirAsia is about 95%, the same as Australia. They prefer to get all their recommendations not from travel agents anymore, but from Weibo, Renren, the equivalent of Twitter and Facebook, since those things are banned in China. Right? So they're using social media to get intelligence, which airline to fly, which hotels to stay, what things to do through social networks, rather than travel agents. So consumer preferences are changing so fast. That's the speed at which things are changing today. Right? So if you're planning a business, or you're planning anything for that matter, and you start, the danger is you start to believe in your plans. Right? You start to believe in your assumptions. Fuel price is going to be $120. You start to believe that's what's going to happen. And you start to have tunnel vision. You don't realize things are changing from the left, from the right, from behind you. So there's a real danger, in fact, to having plans. So how then do you run an organization in an environment like this, right? Where the idea of strategy is obsolete, because the strategy says, okay, what's our long-term plan? What markets do we go into? What products do we develop? 3-year plans, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. You can't predict anyone. Anyone here who thinks he can predict what's going to happen next year, let alone 5 years from now, can you really? Right? So how do you run a business like that? So things that we've learned basically is that instead of having the traditional planning approach, focus on a few things. First, focus on having a clear purpose. Because while external environments can change, the one thing that never changes is your purpose, your compass, right? You need to know ultimately what are you all about. How you get there, which path you go, you will never know. But you need to know what you're about, what you stand for. Secondly, how do you keep focusing on who really matters? In our case, of course, as a business, it's consumers, right? So how do you really focus on what the key insights are? And consumers, by the way, are tricky. Right? Because if you ask someone directly, they'll tell you, I want everything. I want the lowest prices, the best service, the highest quality, highest reliability, but what are the things that really matter? And in fact, to the point where the late Steve Jobs used to say, doesn't believe in market research. Right? So it's not about understanding customers. Is not as simple as talking to them. It's really actually going in the back of their mind to really understand what matters and what matters less. Right? And then ultimately, what we call the continuous change and course correcting. Right? Course correcting basically means, okay, we're going down this path. Something changes. How do you react and change quickly? Right? So if you're sailing, wind blows completely in direction, change the course, move along with the wind. And this, to me, is the real difference between successful and less successful organizations, is the ability to course correct, and specifically the ability and the art of making mistakes. That's the hardest thing to do. Because you know why? People, and frankly, Malaysian organizations struggle with this, the idea of making mistakes. We fear mistakes, right? So when you fear mistakes, you fear taking different decisions. You prefer to do something that other people have already done. It's easy to justify to the boss or the board of directors or the shareholders. Why did you do this? Oh, well, because other people are doing it. Right? And do you want to change? No, I don't want to be the one putting my head back. You make a mistake, boom, you get punished. In Malaysian companies, they send you to cold storage. You know what that means, right? But so we have this culture of fearing making mistakes. Yet, in the environment that we do today, the principle to remember is actually, if you keep doing 10 things and you get 6 or 7 out of 10 right, you're doing very well. The art is when you make those 3 or 4 things wrong, how do you course correct quickly? Right? That's the key difference. And I'll talk to you about, you make tons of mistakes in areas, right? But you learn and you adapt and you move on. That's the difference. Because you can never get everything right. Right? You cannot predict anymore. Right? So it's about the art of making mistakes. Not easy. Now, this doesn't mean you simply allow people to just keep making mistakes and causing losses like this. No, that's not it. Right? You have to learn from making mistakes. Of course, you don't want someone to make the same mistakes over and over again. But you want people to take the risk of doing something different if the motive is clear. And if it doesn't go as planned, move on. Right? There's no blame culture. The big problem we have as organizations is blame culture. Right? Something goes wrong, we're more interested in who made the mistake rather than, okay, what can we learn from it and how do we move on? It's a simple idea, but actually that's really what makes a difference between a good organization in today's world and the rest of the pack. Is to be able to not, to be able to have that patience and temerity to say, okay, it's not about who's at fault, but how do you move on? That's the key difference. Okay? So, let's get this. A clear sense of purpose. This is key. So to me, if you ask a big consultant or management expert, they'll tell you need to have very detailed KPIs, detailed plans, everything worked out. Petronas, they probably have a whole army working on KPIs. Yes, sorry, mind. Right? But actually, sometimes what's more important is to just have a very clear overarching purpose that everybody understands. In our case, our purpose is very clear. And this is important because sometimes, in order to make tough decisions and trade-offs, you need to know how to evaluate. And how you evaluate that is based on having this clarity purpose. Our purpose is very clear. We paint it on our planes. Now everyone can fly. Right? So what does that mean? Our our reason for existing is ensuring that people have options to go to places. And with AAX, now everyone can fly extra long to places that they never even dreamt before. And how do you do it? Well, first you've got to have planes, you've got to have destinations, and you've got to grow. Otherwise, not everybody can fly, right? Only flying to Melbourne and not Sydney, right? You've got to make it affordable. You've got to make it reliable. Otherwise, people are not going to fly with you. Right? And you got to make sure that people are comfortable, because otherwise they don't ever want to fly with you again. So you have to find a way of breaking down the objective into something that everyone in the organization, everyone in the team understands. And in AAX, we've distilled the entire model of running an airline into 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the only things that matter, and everybody focuses on it. You don't have to break this down into dozens and dozens of sub-KPIs. This is it, right? When we start number 1, we said we want to be a $1 billion company in 5 years. Size ultimately matters. You've got to grow big. Every dollar of revenue counts. And in fact, we celebrate all the milestones. When we first started AAX, first 1 million ringgit that we made, first 10 million, first 100 million, first 1 billion ringgit. Last year was our 4th year of operations, and we reached about 1.9 billion ringgit already in 4 years from scratch, from zero. We're doing something that people say cannot exist, right? The crazy Malaysians to do something that the British and Americans do. Secondly, in our business, the way we measure unit cost is looking at your total operating cost as in any airline divided by what's called available seat kilometers. So total number of seats in your plane times the total kilometers that all the planes fly. And it just so happens that it's denominated in US cents, right? And so 2 US cents is our target. It is the world's lowest unit cost. The other thing, by the way, in this industry or any other industry for that matter, increasingly, you've got to be number 1 or at the most number 2. Otherwise, if you're a follower, you're nowhere, right? Just to give you a sense, and I don't know, I might not cover it later, but guess of all the long-haul airlines, right? Big airlines, right? Singapore Airlines, Qantas, Emirates, Cathay Pacific, British Airways, big global giants with hundreds of planes. What do you think? Who has the lowest cost, unit cost before us for flying long haul? Who do you think is the most cost efficient global airline? Singapore Airlines. For all the premium quality products that they have, their cost is the lowest in the world before AAX. What do you think their cost is? Pick a number from 0 to 9. 9 US cents per seat kilometer, right? So we were at 2.8 US cents in 2010 AAX. 2011 actually got up to 3.5 because the price of fuel skyrocketed, right? But even at 3.5 versus 9, that's a huge unit cost gap, right? That means the other people who tried to do this, the problem with a lot of airlines that failed was that, firstly, they had people from legacy carriers running these airlines, and they do things, this is the airline way of doing this. So you might just tweak it here, tweak it there, you might get 15 or 20% cost advantage. But what do the big boys do? They just keep matching you on price, force you to lower your price. You start pricing below cost, you start losing a lot of money. Right? And that's how airlines go bankrupt very easily. They keep pricing below cost. Because offering low fares is the easiest thing in the world. Everybody will do it. All the new airlines do it. The way you succeed in the business, the difficult part is making sure that your cost is still lower than your low price. That's the hard part, right? To make sure that you have a big advantage. And because it's denominated in US cents, it gives this mindset among everyone in AirAsia that, oh, every cent counts, right? So every amount of money that gets saved counts, right? So having 2 US cents as the ultimate objective, basically to ensure that we always will be the world's lowest unit cost airline. Today, AirAsia has, with 11 planes, the absolute world's lowest unit cost airline. You cannot find another airline with a lower unit cost structure than this. So we are pushing the industry, the global industry, in ways nobody has ever imagined before. 3 out of 4 hours, the plane must be in the air, because we make money when the planes are flying. When the planes are down, everybody has a sense of, okay, every hour counts, right? Get the plane fixed, get people in the plane, get people out of the plane, move the plane, get it flying, because that's what matters. Right? And 4 out of 5 seats in the plane can fly, but if it's not filled, you're not in the plane, right? So 4 out of 5 seats, simply 80% load factor must, that's the targets that we set. So everybody in the organization understands this. And actually, it may sound simple, but in life, simplifying things is the most difficult thing. Right? It's easier to write a 200-page assignment than it is to write a 2-page answer to a big question. Right? Because to try to distill what are the things that really matter, that's when you really have to scratch your head. 200 pages, you guys can probably, write all kinds of stuff to fill 200 pages. To distill everything into 1 or 2 pages, that's the tough part. Right? And as an organization, if you cannot really describe it in simple terms that everybody understands, then people are doing things differently. Right? So when changes in macroeconomic conditions, changes in technology, changes in consumer preferences, you don't know how to react. But once you know these as your objectives, you can always evaluate it much clearer. So that's the critical importance, first of all, of having clarity of purpose. What are you all about? What makes sense so that everybody understands? So that whatever happens externally, you have a compass to guide you. Is this going to achieve 1, 2, 3, or 4? If not, don't do it. So simple. The breakthrough customer insights. Ultimately, this is what counts. And you know how we're able to become the world's lowest unit cost operator? Simply thinking differently. The key insight for AAX that apparently nobody saw, because everybody in the airline industry runs the airline the same way. Right? The planes may have different colors, flight attendants different color uniforms, but they will all run the same way. What we noticed was that when you fly long haul, all these international carriers, the critical insight is this: they were running their planes at a 50% utilization rate, meaning the planes on average were flying 12 hours a day. You can Google Cathay Pacific annual report. Check on me, don't trust me, right? Average aircraft utilization 12 hours a day. Why? Because these airlines, their DNA was serving the premium passenger. 40, 50 years ago when you fly international, it was a glamorous experience. You wore your suit and tie, your best dress, you get on the plane, champagne, silverware, that was flying international. It was a glamorous experience, right? And so their whole DNA was all about serving the premium passenger, the first class, business class passengers. And these passengers, you know what's most important to them? Time. They are time-sensitive people, and they're less price-sensitive. And so they design an entire industry to fly the planes to suit the convenience of their premium passengers. That's why you notice, say from KLIA, all the long-haul planes, most of the flights leave late at night, right? To arrive here first thing in the morning in Sydney, first thing in Heathrow at 6 a.m. Right? So that the businessmen can, arrive, get straight to work, but the plane doesn't fly back. It stays on the ground. When we arrived in Sydney at 9:45 in the morning, right? By 10:55 we had left. Right? But before that, the Malaysia Airlines plane, the SQ A380 were already there. When we left, hours later, those planes are still there. It's waiting. Why? Because the important businessmen don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. to catch an earlier flight back at 7 a.m. And so the plane waits for passengers. The other thing is, when you fly long haul, you need a big physical fuel tank to traverse that distance. So you need a lot of seats. So the airlines came up with this whole hub and spoke model to feed passengers from shorter distances into their long haul flights. But because they were serving the premium passenger who wants convenience, they make planes wait for one another. So typically, for example, right, flights from Australia, they had time to match the flights going to Europe. Right? So your flights from Sydney to KL, let's say you arrive at gate 33. If you're going to Europe, these Australian passengers, right, they just already have their boarding pass. They walk over to gate 37 and catch their connecting flight to London or Paris. The planes are made to wait for passengers because they're serving convenience. What we realized is that there are actually a lot of people out there who are more price sensitive than they are time sensitive. Right? So if you basically remove the idle time, you do all the same exact maintenance checks and everything, but it's the idle time. If you go to Sydney Airport at 11 o'clock in the morning and you stare at that Malaysia Airlines plane or the Singapore Airlines plane, no one's doing any work. It's just waiting. Right? So if you remove that idle time, we fly the world's highest aircraft utilization rate at 17 hours a day. Now the simple math is this, right? If you fly 17 hours a day versus 12 hours a day, meaning you get an extra 5 hours a day, right? How many hours in a year? How many days in a year? How many extra flying hours, right? So about 40% more flights for the same cost of a brand new plane. Each flight, the same exact plane that we fly, has about 30% more seats. Why? Because all these other airlines, 1/3 of the plane is first class, business class, right? Takes up a lot of room. We have more economy seats. So when you've got 30% more seats each flight, and you get 40% more flights in a year, simple math means, even if you charge 50% less, in 1 year for the same cost of that brand new plane, you're making the same amount of revenue. It's simple. It's not rocket science, but no one figured this out. Right? So, for example, Oasis Hong Kong, right? When they tried to do low-cost long haul, the 99 pounds to London, they would fly in the morning to Gatwick and then leave the plane there for 10 hours before flying back. Now it sounds blindingly obvious, right? But of course now, the people who were ridiculing this before, so apparently the Singaporeans were taking very close notes. Copy for years. Now they're going to launch an AirAsia X version, right? So, but it's okay. We'll talk about what makes the difference. So it's really understanding that consumer insight that really makes the difference. That's how you completely break through, by simply saying, hey, not everyone is time sensitive. Just to give you an example, right? When we started flying to the Gold Coast, we would fly late at night, arriving Gold Coast early in the morning. Okay? And then the plane immediately turns around, flies back. At that time, in 2007, there was no flight from Sydney that got to the Gold Coast early enough to catch our flight. Yet, 8% of our Gold Coast passengers were from Sydney. Now what were these guys doing? Maybe some of you, I don't know, but they were flying in the night before, staying in a hotel or motel with friends or relatives, and apparently 0.5% of them were sleeping on the beach or in the parks, right, to catch that early morning flight. Now at that time, in 2007, believe it or not, there was another so-called low-cost long-haul airline flying from Sydney direct to KL. Jetstar had that service until it was cancelled, right? So we asked these passengers, why are you not flying this airline direct from Sydney to KL 8 hours? Instead, you're flying at night, so your journey now is like 20 hours. 150 Australian dollars price difference. Now, if you think about it, for a family of 4, 600 Australian dollars, that's your entire hotel budget in Malaysia. Or in some of our cases, the entire shopping budget. Right? So people are that price sensitive. Right? Time is less value to them than it is to a businessman. Another simple example, every airline seems to think you must have this same consistent flight schedule every day, same time, right? So businessmen are taking the 11:45 p.m. flight to London. They always know the same exact time. But for example, London, right? If we were to fly from KL to London, 13 and a half hours, 1 hour turn around, fly back, it's about 27, 28 hours return. So if you have to fly the same time every day, guess what? You need more planes, right? Versus that same plane coming, let's say leaving Monday, but Tuesday it leaves in the afternoon, Wednesday it leaves at night. So you're maximizing the use of the plane. And people who are flying with us, they say, look, I want the lowest price. Doesn't matter whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening. That's not their main criteria. It is a criteria, but that's not the main criteria, right? So if you save 1,000 ringgit, I'll take a slightly different time. So it's just by thinking about a different customer, what are their needs, you can unlock this completely different model that no one in the entire aviation industry can solve. That was the key to unlocking AirAsia X. And the reason why, as I said, I have no problems that the Singaporeans have been flying with us and copying notes and all that, because the issue is not the business model. Business models can be easily copied. Strategies and plans can be easily copied. In fact, when you think about it, right? In Europe, you know the number of airlines who tried to do exactly what Ryanair does and have failed. Right? So it's not about, this is the right model, or this is the wrong model. What really matters is how you execute it every day. That's something that you cannot easily copy. Right? So it all comes down, basically, business and running organizations going forward is less about strategy. It's more about how you execute it day in, day out. And that's why it comes back to this, how do you come up with new things? How do you become more, adventurous and risk-taking? How do you learn to make mistakes? The culture that you build, those are the things that are going to matter more than the traditional idea of having this grand master strategy, master plan, vision 2020. You know, not to belittle it, but you know, what matters is not about the vision of the top leader. You know, think about these Malaysians. You know, I would be more worried about Malaysia right now, not so much of whether we have the right strategy or master plan, but whether as a people, do we have the right mindset? I think this is the biggest challenge for Malaysia, just to digress a little bit, because you know what? There's so much negativity in the country right now. Right? Everybody just wants to criticize, wants to hentam, you know, and that basically means, you know, pointing fingers. Oh, you're wrong. No, you're more wrong. No, you're more wrong. Right? That's the negativity, as opposed to creating a culture, a society that's built on, you know, embracing. So if you think about the principles we're talking about, applies even to running a country. Right? So those values are what will make a country or an organization or a team or a family succeed or fail in the world that we live in today. It's no longer about Vision 2020. It's whether we as a country, we as a people, are willing to be more positive, are willing to be more risk-taking, you know, are willing to accept differences. That's what counts. So in the details, not so much. Well, the other thing we're really obsessed about with the AAX model is you got to know all the little details, right? Every single flight, every single detail. For example, you know, people ask, how do you deal with fuel price? What's your fuel hedging strategy? A lot of analysts will ask this. Actually, they have no idea what they're talking about. Because you know what? No airline in the world, or any industry for that matter, has ever achieved a sustainable competitive advantage from a fuel hedging strategy. So fuel hedging, it's a bit like going to a casino. Because you're entering into a contract with the bank, right? And the bank will never give you terms that will make them lose money. And it's like a casino. The casino always wins in the long run. You might win a little bit here, you lose a little bit there. But on the whole, do you think the banks are there for charity? No. Right? They're there to make money. They will make money from you. Right? So if your lecturers tell you about fuel hedging strategy, ask them. You don't know what they're talking about. Because if you say an airline that says I'm hedged 90% or I'm hedged 10%, actually they're not telling you anything. What's the cost of the hedge? What's the terms of the hedge? You know, the risk profile that you take is completely, you know, you can't compare like for like. But what we focus on is things that we can control. For example, today, AAX is the world's lowest fuel-burning airline per passenger. Last or more recently, in flight of A330s, we burn about 2.2 liters per seat per 100 kilometers, or roughly translated, that's about 93 miles per gallon. So it's better than your Toyota Prius. Whereas, you know, a Cathay Pacific would be about 53 miles per gallon. That's a huge difference. Now that difference comes from measuring like 100 different initiatives. Literally, just to give you examples, why do you think we don't carry the Star newspaper on board? Because it's weight. Why do you think we don't have magazines? We measure how much water is in our toilets. Other airlines, right, when you arrive, okay, fill up water tank. Us, okay, this particular flight, night flight versus day flight, you need 50% water. Right, and let's say you water tank. If you carry a pail of water, you know how heavy water is, right? So if I take out 200 kilos of water, that's a lot of fuel that's being burnt. How do you manage the engines? How do you wash the engines? Even washing the plane surface, tiny dust creates additional friction on the plane. That's the level that we go into. And because if you want to be the world's best, you've got to get into the details. And so the balance becomes, how do you, keep trying to figure out what's going on globally around the world, but at the same time being very obsessed with tiny details, but knowing when to change. So that's the hard part, but you got to sweat the details. And you've got to continuously change. If we say, okay, we as AAX, we've developed this proven now new low-cost long-haul model that no one has ever done before. Ultimately, soon someone's going to come in, and as they have, and they're going to start copying you, and maybe they've got more money, and they'll become better. Like, remember the Nokia position or the BlackBerry position, right? If you rest on your laurels, someone's finally going to come and knock you. So you always got to think, what's next, what's next? So we came up with this idea of introducing flatbed seats. And again, people in the industry said, you guys are crazy. This adds cost, this adds complexity, it goes against the LCC model. You're nuts. But what we saw was, hang on a second. Actually, these business class seats, other airlines are charging a bomb. I don't know whether you fly business class or not, when you fly back. But if you do, all the other airlines are raping you. They charge a lot of money, right? I mean, imagine, right? How much does it cost for a business class from Sydney to Yale, right? A lot of money. And but airlines justified by putting in a lot of frills, right? Lounges, champagne, caviar. If you don't drink alcohol on board the plane when you fly a full service airline, you're subsidizing the other guy who's drinking. Just remember that. Okay? So all this extra cost goes into justifying that very high price. What we realized is that there must be people when they travel because they want comfort, right? If you give them the same quality seat, and we invest in making sure our pillows are big, nice comfortable duvets, and when we first started to get cotton blankets, we said no, things that matter to the customers, we got this very comfortable duvets, and you can charge a fraction of the business class fare because you don't need all the extras, right? I mean, the lounges, airlines spend millions on lounges, and what do customers do? They go to the lounge 15 minutes before they fly, some peanuts, orange juice, probably steal a magazine. Right? That's all you do at an airline lounge, right? And is that really worth, paying 5,000 ringgit more? Right? Is that champagne, that food really worth 5,000 ringgit more? Right? So, coming up with understanding what is it that customers really want and being very different. The other thing that we thought of was, if our plane instead were all economy seats, and we only have 12 of these flatbeds, right? So if the last 10% of our space on the plane, if we had all economy, those last 10% probably 2 months out of the year will be filled, right? During peak season, December, January, February, when you guys go back to university, is when all the seats are full. But most of the time, even at 90% capacity, right, you're not using the last space. So by removing that last 10% and putting it with flatbed seats, every day of the year, you're getting revenue from that space that would otherwise be unutilized. And so you're actually getting much more total revenue or yield for the same cost of the plane. But again, just thinking very differently, despite the fact that everybody says, you're not supposed to have business class seats, you're an LCC. So we just keep not telling them, tell you, this government, Malaysian government, right? Do you know how many times I've been told in my face, you're not allowed to fly to Sydney? You're not allowed to fly to any route that MAS flies. Okay. 2 weeks later, 2 months later, I go back. Can I fly to Melbourne? No. Can I fly to Melbourne? Finally, got it. Then I show all the data. When we fly to Melbourne and Perth, the market has doubled. Sydney, flat negative growth. Adelaide, flat negative growth. Right. So it's not a new demand that's been created. Finally, they said, okay, you can fly to Seoul, but not Sydney. Finally, in June 22nd of 2011, you can fly everywhere except Sydney. Seriously, it is a written official letter from the ministry. Right? But do you stop? Right? Just because someone says no, you can't do it, do you stop? Just keep going again. Sampai the Prime Minister muak. They say, I don't want to see you again. Why do you keep talking about Sydney? To the point where we even had Julia Gillard go see the Prime Minister and say, can you allow your airline to fly to our country? That's how crazy it was. We got it because you never take no for an answer. You just never give up if you do it. Just to wrap up, just the point about making mistakes. So many mistakes, but just to share with you one. I don't know whether some of you are around in 2008 and so in 2009, whether you flew on average at extent. We used to have these black seats in economy, okay? And the theory behind these black seats was interesting. Again, to try something new, revolutionary, adventurous, innovative, right? We had these new seat designs called fixed back shell. Because when you sit in economy, sometimes there's a problem. You're trying to eat or work on your laptop, and the person in front of you leans into your space, right? Especially if you're sitting on the window side, you want to get out, susah, right? So this concept, this idea was the back is fixed, but you get a recline with the cushion gliding forward, right? So sort of like gliding like that. Same angle of recline, but without having the back invade the space of the person behind you. Innovative idea, one of the first in the world to do it. So sometimes ideas are great. The problem was, when it was mass manufactured and installed in a plane, we realized it wasn't intuitive, right? The gliding mechanism wasn't so smooth that even if someone tried to lean backwards, it would glide naturally. And passengers being passengers, even if we had it on videos, announcements, they still didn't get it. They pressed the button, they tried to push back. And of course they didn't push back, right? So these passengers were flying from Melbourne to KL, 8-hour flight in a full upright position. Okay? And very soon, my Facebook was completely flooded with all the four-letter words. I will never fly with you again, it's so uncomfortable, it's the worst seats in the world. Now, we realized then that look, this is difficult, right? This is not something we can simply solve by trying to explain to people, which is, when an idea doesn't work, it doesn't work. We had to do a write-off. 60 million ringgit down the toilet. 20 million Australian dollars, 20 million US dollars to replace all the seats with the new seats that we have now. Most companies, I'll probably lose my job, right, for that amount of money, right? Or do I say, it's the engineer's fault for not testing, or it's the marketing's fault for not properly marketing it. It wasn't about people's fault. When an idea doesn't work, move on, right? So many mistakes. Other things we did, we used to have in-seat, in-flight entertainment. We thought we were cool. One of the first LCCs in the world to have in-seat entertainment. And it wasn't just about movies, we even had chat. So, let's say you wanted to chat, that cute girl on seat 27C. Hi, I'm 35B, I'd like to meet you. You could do that on an AirAsia X plane. And, it was cool. But the problem was, when you install it in every seat, we later learned that, Hollywood, for example, charges movie license fees based on number of seats, not based on number of people who watch it, because they don't trust airlines to report how many people actually watched it or buy it. So you've got very expensive fixed costs. And a lot of our flights, 40% of our flights were late night flights, right? Let's say the Sydney flight leaving at 11:40 at night, arriving in the morning. Most people just want to get on and sleep. So only 20% of people were watching. And the economics were killing us. The weight of the system, the licensing fees, very low take-up. Again, made massive amount of money right on. But it was the right thing to do. It wasn't wrong to try. If you think about it, okay, the idea could make sense, it works. But you cannot expect any organization, anyone, any department to get it right 100% of the time. Impossible. So you have to have this view, go into any situation to say, 60 or 70% right is good. Right? Despite what your professor says, right? But it's doing those 3 or 4 things out of 10 wrong, how fast can you change instead of just getting to this blame game? That's what makes the difference. Anyway, we got this cool new product, which is called an empty seat option. Other airlines don't do this. We observe, right, sometimes when you fly, let's say you see a row of empty seats, how people, the moment the seatbelt sign goes up, I'm going to rush and grab that, right, because I want the space to myself. So we decided, hey, let's create an option where you pay a small amount of money up front, let's say 50 ringgit. If on that day, we don't sell out all of our seats, right, and there's some seats available, we can block the whole row for you, and you can have it. But if we sell those seats, we'll refund you back the money. No one's thought about this. You actually can create money and give someone value out of nothing. Because the seats are there. If it's unused, it's going to be unused anyway. Right? So to create the idea that it's an option. Because if you make it a guaranteed product, then you run the risk of losing the opportunity if someone else had wanted to pay the full price for that seat. Right? And on long haul, these things matter. Right? Flying 1 hour to Penang, nobody really cares. Right? But 8 hours to Sydney, if you get the option to stretch out, all 3 seats to your row for 50 ringgit, 80 ringgit, 100 ringgit, and the cool thing is we dynamically price. Because if I say, okay, if I offer 50 ringgit on the system, how many people see 50 ringgit and accept? Let's say 50%. If I offer 80 ringgit, if I still get the same 50% rate, I know, hey, next time I'm going to price 80 ringgit. Right? So you kind of learn dynamically, and so you develop the system. Again, it's getting into the detail to keep trying new things and tweaking. So you've got to know you're not going to get everything right, but keep doing new things, keep doing different things. Don't do what everybody else does, because otherwise you're just a follower. And in today's world, if you want to succeed, running your own business, running a department, you've got to be willing to make, do things different. Otherwise, you will always be a follower. Right? And do we as a country, for example, just want to be a follower? Right? That's why I find, sometimes these people say, oh, let's study best practices. Well, best practices means it's just someone else already done it. So why are you copying? Right? Who says that we as Malaysians cannot be the first to try new things? Right? Despite the fact that all these global experts will tell you you're wrong, you cannot do it, you're Malaysians, what do you know? You can do it. You can make a big difference. It's the mindset. It's the culture. This is the one thing for me that really sets AAX apart. If you haven't figured it out, when you look at me and my team here, we're really a crazy bunch of people. Right? We just do really great things, but we celebrate it. That's who we are. Because if you want to be different, you have to create a culture that embraces doing crazy things. Right? That's the value. Right? Because you don't want to be the one to simply blame people, not wanting to do things. So you've got to create a whole culture of doing really, really crazy things. I could tell you about the parties that we throw, but probably going to censor it. Right? But it's just the crazy things that you do, to really create a culture that I think makes a big difference. As a leader, you have to think about the dynamics of your team, of your organization. How do you really make it truly stand out so that people want to be part of the team, and it's not just another job. So stand it up. It's the belief. It's the belief that when we set out to do something, we always have to aim high. Right? That's an actual picture. 21st May 2011, we got the AirAsia flag on top of Mount Everest. February 2011, we got the AirAsia. I brought the AirAsia flag to Antarctica. Right? So the AirAsia flag has been to the bottom of the world, to the top of the world, right? And because for us it symbolizes pushing the extremes, getting to the top. Right? And Tony keeps saying this to us every day, ingrained in our mind. Believe the unbelievable, dream the impossible, and never take no for an answer. Because if we did, we wouldn't be here in Sydney. Thank you very much. Fire away.
Hello. Really thanks for your time, Mr. Azran, to come down here to share very meaningful insights on not just the challenges, but of course the success story of AAX as well. I think I have two questions actually. First question is actually regarding the organization, the culture that you mentioned. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I read this somewhere, but the boss of Virgin, Sir Richard Branson, actually said this. Now, a lot of people actually think that shareholders is the most important stakeholders out of a company where the management will try to please them. But Richard Branson actually said that employees is actually the one, because from his theory, he thinks that if he makes the employee happy, the employee can make the customers happy. Customers can make the shareholders happy. So what is the employee value proposition, I would say, of AAX, especially, or what are the action plans actually in nurturing the mindset towards the workforce in AAX, and what are the action plans in terms of having the kind of, encouraging creativity? I think creativity is one of the most important value of AAX. Our second question is actually price sensitivity. I think the student population is actually falls under the categories of price sensitivity. Any future plans of offering special rates for Malaysian students on top of the awesome deals that you're offering at the moment? Thanks.
Wow, that's a big surprising question. Actually, students are the easiest because you know when you can travel. You can actually buy the big schedule extension sales, 9 months out, 10 months out, and you get the absolute lowest fares. So we're equal opportunity. Everybody gets a chance for the lowest fares. But the question of an employee value proposition is key. I think if I have to summarize it, 4 things, a couple that I've touched on. The first definitely has to be having that clarity of purpose, right? Because from an employee perspective, it's to be part of an organization that stands for something, right? Not just a job, right? And I think people at AAX, first and foremost, we're travelers, right? We love to travel. We're crazy about traveling, and the idea that you could, empower people to travel when before they couldn't afford to travel, right? Just to give you an example, right? The things that really warm our hearts, right? Stories when I remember. Was it July or August 2008, the first year we were flying to Gold Coast. I was on that flight, and we just arrived on the Gold Coast. And typical Malaysian family when they travel with the extended family, cousins, 3 generations, nephews, grandmother, all coming together, very excited. First time to the Gold Coast, first time to Australia. And then they got out and they're like, and then of course they kind of recognized me on the plane. That's right. When you saw this Gold Coast, your ads, sunshine, blue skies, beach, theme park, it's so cold, grey, wet. This is not Gold Coast. They didn't even realize that Southern Hemisphere, July, this is winter. Now you guys probably know that because you live here, but these are people who are first-time travelers. So that winter must be December, January, because you see that in the movies, right? Christmas, snow, white snow. Right? So it didn't even occur. Just give you an example, right? So for us to be able to create opportunities for people to come to Australia for the first time and never traveled before. I remember, one of the first flights to Gold Coast, we were asking, 48% of the Australians on that flight had never left Australia before. Right? So it's that power, right? So when you have a purpose that is bigger than just, grow revenue or capture market share, it means something to employees. Second, growth opportunities. I think it's important that we create, I think especially, frankly, this new Generation Y, millennial generation, people are hungry for growth opportunities, to try new things, right? And as an organization, you can make a big difference by creating those opportunities, getting people to do things that in a normal organization, they wouldn't allow you to do until you've had 10 years of experience. Right? Can we look, even me, right? At my age, I would probably just be middle manager somewhere else in another organization, but to be given this opportunity. And we celebrate it when people really put up their hands and try new things. Sumi joined AAX as a financial analyst from PricewaterhouseCoopers. First 18 months, lots of spreadsheets. Today, she is our head of our integrated operations center. The team that looks at maps of the world, where the planes are flying at any one time. Anything happens, let's say volcanic ash, they got to deal with, airport closed, what do we do? Call fuel, call customers, call catering, all this logistics. She did it. How? She volunteered, she wanted to learn, she wanted to get her hands dirty, operations work, she did everything, right? And so in her early 30s right now, right, she is now head of an operations manager because she said, I want to do something more than spreadsheets. And many people, Dharma started at AirAsia as a call center operator, right? Then he said, no, I want to fly, I want to be like all the flight attendants, right? And again, just learning from flight attendants, and you have a culture where let's say, I want to learn. Okay, I'll teach you, I'll show you, you volunteer, do extra work. And passed all of his exams. He was a certified flight attendant. He could fly, very excited to fly. But then, a couple of years later, he said, I want to think about a long-term career. Again, volunteering on his off days, proved himself. Today in AAX, he's our aircraft scheduling executive, right? So he manages where planes are. Let's say, this plane comes in late 15 minutes, this one goes to Sydney, and this one will go to Hangzhou, and he walks around anywhere with his laptop, and if he needs to connect, if he's driving, something happened to the aircraft rotation, park the car, plug in his BlackBerry, get 3G signal, send everyone email notices. Okay, this flight movement changes. That's Dharma from call center operator. So when you create opportunities like that, to me, that is much more powerful than big, bonuses or incentives. We say, I love great bonuses, but more importantly today, it's the meaning of the work. To be able to come to an organization and get to do things that you would otherwise not be able to do. A lot of people, you think about the jobs we've created, right? People get a chance to travel, to come to places, whether it's Sydney, Tokyo, do things that they would otherwise not get a chance to do. They would be the ones sitting in the office, and only the big bosses do everything, right? So creating opportunities to grow is a strong part of the value proposition. The other thing I think is creating a culture that's open and transparent, right? And it's not just the physical part. Yes, if you come to our office, we don't have office rooms, right? I have the same desk size as everyone, right? That creates information flow, and you can make quick decisions. If big thing happens, in front of me is commercial director, head of legal, chief pilot, chief engineer, CFO. You don't even have to call a meeting or have an agenda, go to the meeting room. You just swivel your chair, talk about it, make a decision, move on. We're the only airline in the world today where the chief pilot and the chief engineer have two adjoining desks. We don't even have cubicles, because cubicles creates this wall, so it's sort of desks. Right? Because normally, in airlines, right, the pilots are in one building, the engineers in a different building, and they kind of hate each other. So the pilots blame engineers, Abdullah, you cannot maintain the plane properly, he's always making this noise. And the engineers would say, you don't know how to fly the plane, it's your technique, you always blame each other. Right? Problems in organizations inevitably mostly are cross-functional. Right? It's never one person's fault. Right? And so sometimes you have to have meetings, steering committee, working group, meet several times just to solve an issue. And let me tell you, once you put the chief pilot and chief engineer together, there are no more secrets, no more agendas, right? You can hear everything, even their girlfriend problems or wife problems because of girlfriend, semua right there. Right? So creating that openness and transparency. Accessibility is key. I think, ours is a culture where, which is a young guy, right? You can just walk up to me, right, without an appointment and say, hey, I've got an idea, or I've got a problem. Or these days, most of our team members just communicate via Facebook, right? So I get tons of direct feedback. Right? And that openness, interestingly, not many companies have. Not many organizations practice that. Because somehow, once you get to the top, you want status. You want that big corner office, you create boards, you create secretaries, gatekeepers, you want to have board meetings. It creates distance and slows down information flow. So I think openness and transparency is a key part of the employee value proposition. The last part, the fourth part, is the culture, the tribal culture. Right? And that's what I think matters more than what an HR consultant will tell you. You must have succession planning, career development, KPIs, and bonus schemes and all that. It's just the simple things.
So I'm Mohammed Sufyan Salami. I posted a video to your Facebook last night. Yeah. I was there last night. I got no class last morning.
So you sent me a Facebook message and I saw it.
Okay, I got two questions. First, we all know the airline industry is a very volatile industry. Volatility from the day you start H1N1, oil price, and domino effect crisis. Then, now you have, my question is, how do you motivate your team? And now, apart from that, you also have competition from school. School, Jetstar, and you're also competing with the likes of the giants in the Asia Pacific, Caribbean, Emirates. That's first. Second, what is the fate of Christchurch? So, because of you, I cancelled my two questions. Because it costs same amount to travel from Sydney to Christchurch, like Christchurch.
Tough. Well, it is a tough industry, and sometimes you've got to make tough decisions. I think in terms of, motivating people, we just talked about just now, those 4 points, I think is clear, right? Despite all the global challenges, it's really, you have the clarity of purpose, you have a culture that is flexible, adaptable, open, can move fast, and you've got a great team with you. That's, to me, how we deal with competition and the external challenges. Right? There's no secret strategy. It is this team, right? I'm just a pretty face, but these are the guys that make AAX successful. Right? The challenge that we're in today, requires, if you want to survive, you've got to make some tough decisions. The problem that I guess is new for people is that airlines, they were operating like utilities before. Okay, so sometimes even if, let's say, a route is unviable, they would still keep flying. You think about Malaysia Airlines, still kept flying to Buenos Aires and South Africa for years, losing lots and lots and lots of money because one day, told Mahathir, said, hey, let's fly there. And then they just kept flying there. And so airlines, the idea of airlines sort of matching supply to demand was alien, and that's why people wanted to do it. But actually, for us, one of the key lessons that we learned in order to survive is, you've got to concentrate and build a leadership position in certain markets. The challenge of AAX before was that because it was so hard to get route approvals, we had to grab whatever we could. Because we had planes coming in, but we had ordered billions of dollars worth of aircraft. They're coming in, nowhere to fly. So suddenly I get, 4 times a week Christchurch, take it. 4 times a week Paris, take it. Right? But you learn if you don't have scale, right? Because there's a lot of fixed costs in this business, right? To set up airport operations, marketing, putting an ad, whether you're flying once a week or twice a day, same cost. Right? Suddenly, by the end of 2011, we finally got all the policy restrictions removed. We could not fly anywhere. That meant we finally had an opportunity to realign our route network. So while we may have cut some places like Christchurch or London or Paris, we were adding, so redeploying that capacity to places like Sydney, to places like Tokyo. Melbourne, I think, is getting extra flights. Perth is getting extra flights. Taipei is getting extra flights because choose a few markets. Let's say Australia has been very profitable for us. Why? Multiple cities. And cities like Sydney and Melbourne have the opportunity to grow even beyond once a day to twice a day. So you can have scale, right? So now we've learned, okay, over the next 3 years, frankly, we're going to double our capacity, right? From 11 planes to almost 20 planes over the next 3-4 years. We don't even have to start into a new country anymore. Right? In Australia, there's double daily Sydney, double daily Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide. Japan, there's Nagoya, Fukuoka, Sapporo. Korea, there's Busan. China, probably 5 more cities with 5-10 million population each. So we can actually concentrate and build a much bigger position than stretching ourselves too thin in so many places. So as tough as it is, right, the worst thing to do actually is to carry on even if you're losing money, because unfortunately, unlike government airlines, we cannot say, oh, can we please have another billion ringgit? Right? We die, we die. Right? So you got to survive, and that means making tough decisions to survive and grow. And that means choosing. It's no different than Starbucks making an announcement, closing 800 stores in Europe, but then adding 1,000 stores in China. Right? So you've got to reallocate capacity to where the growth is, and we've got the biggest potential.
First of all, congratulations to you for your successful path. And then my question is more personal question. And you graduated as an engineer, and what brought you to the aviation industry?
I only did engineering because I couldn't do anything else. I know I wanted to get out of Malaysia and couldn't do medicine. Kept studying blood. Law, reading books, same thing with accounting, numbers, no pictures. I need pictures, right? I need color. So law and accounting, which is bad news. And in those days, what's left? Engineering, okay lah. So by process of elimination. I have no regrets. I've never practiced as an engineer, but to me, one thing I learned is it doesn't matter what your degree is. In fact, it doesn't even matter whether you have a PhD in something. That doesn't limit your career options. We've hired, throughout my career, I've hired people from, history majors, psychology majors, even medical doctors doing, business type roles, because the university degree base gives you the foundation, the art of learning, exploring, communicating, working in teams. Those are the valuable skills. Frankly, what you learn in engineering, what I learned in engineering right now is already obsolete, right? And so, for the same context, right, if you think about my career, okay, there's one word I had to describe it. It's serendipity. It's just go with the flow, right? So, I came after the engineering degree. I said, okay, let me, I worked in joined a management consulting firm because the idea of working in multiple industries was appealing. I get to learn new things. I get bored very easily. I probably have attention deficit disorder actually. So I started doing things from steel manufacturing to nuclear power plants. I used to live in Korea, working for a nuclear power plant. It was by the sea, and sometimes lunch at sea. When we had seafood, I count the number of eyes on the fish. Doing a lot of crazy things, but suddenly 1997 happened, right? Financial crisis. There was an opportunity to work for a bank. I never worked in a financial institution. I grabbed it because I wanted to learn, right? From there, from the whole financial restructuring, I got into corporate finance, taught myself finally the numbers, just not so much because I want the numbers, but because I just like the idea of making deals happen, right? And got into corporate finance advisory. And then sometimes, actually I moved to Korea and I had a great time there. I actually wanted to permanently relocate to Korea. And I went to the partner's office, the managing partner of McKinsey in Korea, to basically talk to him about permanently relocating to Korea. Family, kids and all that. Love it. The phone rings. Right? And it's the partner in Singapore that says, oh, McKinsey just won this project to work for Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange. Very political exercise, very few Malaysians in McKinsey. Can we please have Azran come down and work on this project? So I thought, okay, fine, I'll do it for 3 months. But I really want to go back to Korea. Turned out, I never went back to get my rice cooker, my toaster, my stereo. It's somewhere in storage in Korea, because that short 3-month project, I developed a relationship with Dr. Azran Hashim, who's the chairman of the stock exchange. And finally said, okay, we finished doing all the design, planning of the transformation of KLSE into what today is Bursa Malaysia, a public listed company. It used to be a non-profit, semi-government organization. It's now a for-profit company. He said, well, all these plans are great, but nobody understands stock exchanges. Keep making something happen rather than just advising or planning, but making it happen was a challenge I took. And massive pay cut, right? 50% pay cut. I just wanted the challenge, right? Sold a Land Rover, bought a used Proton Vira. First time in our family, we counted our grocery money. Because, tight. But it was a learning experience. And after all of that was done, phone call from some weird guy called Ralph Marshall, who said Astro had just completed their IPO, raised 2 billion ringgit, and they wanted to go from being a Malaysian company to being an international company, investing in media businesses in Indonesia, China, India, and they wanted me to do it. I had no experience in the media industry, but just grab the opportunity, learn very quickly, started up a lot of businesses. In Indonesia, we went from, first joint venture agreement paper, in 10 months, 400 employees, 5 channels that we pioneered. If you remember Malaysia, Astro Awani or Astro Aruna, Astro Ceria, those are all we started in Indonesia. And then we brought the concepts later to Astro in Malaysia. Right? So starting up a lot of businesses. And I guess, and then one crazy guy called me, Tony Fernandez, and said, oh, when you started up a lot of business, I've got this really crazy idea. Right? And Tony being a shoot negotiator, another pay cut. Right? But the idea of doing something that no one else in the world has ever done before. The idea that, if you could do it somehow, it would change global aviation. Because at the end of the day, Astro, right, for all the things he was doing, it was still kind of following the B-Spidey model, right, or the Foxtel model. It's just jumbo couple strategy, right? Whereas AAX, completely new, right? No one has been able to do it before. So a chance like this, I thought, was once in a lifetime. So you grab it. So the same principles, you can never predict, you can never plan your careers. Why bother? Keep your eyes open, meet a lot of new people, and try different things. Because you never know, right? You might think, okay, I'm set to be an engineer. You might turn out to be a master chef, right? You might turn out to be a great cartoonist who's very successful, right? You just never know where your life is going to take you. So the problem I have with people who have this fixed plan is you tunnel vision. You miss out on opportunities that you would have never imagined. 6 years ago, if you asked me, would I ever be, running an airline, I would have just laughed at you. What a crazy idea. I just couldn't even imagine. But if you keep your eyes open, things will happen.
Hi John, how are you going? The question regarding, we talk about costs and minimizing costs and being able to getting price sensitivity in terms of revenue, targeting certain, customers. But how do you quantify or qualify the effectiveness of, say, advertising with QPR? I'm sponsoring QPR or F1 teams and stuff like that, being a very low-cost carrier. You would think, okay, I've got to minimize advertising spend and stuff like that. But the fact that I'm talking about it myself is effectiveness. But yeah, how do you quantify, qualify that kind of reach? Does it add to your revenue base?
If you asked us, what was the precise return on investment, there is no number. Sometimes you go with a gut. And a lot of credit has to go to Tony, because when he first started sponsoring Manchester United, people thought he was just completely crazy, right? Why would a low-cost carrier sponsor Manchester United? You don't even fly to London or Manchester. And that was 2005, okay? Now, it elevated the AirAsia brand globally, right? People heard about it. It wasn't until 2009, and this was 2005, before even AirAsia was formed, right? AirAsia was formed 2007, and then 2009, AirAsia started flights to London. Interesting statistic. When we first started, in December 2007, AirAsia had not even an ability to fly to London. Yet, in a brand awareness survey in the UK, right, Oasis Hong Kong, which had been already flying Hong Kong London for well over 12 months, no sign of problems, only 19% of people had heard of Oasis Hong Kong. That same brand awareness survey, AirAsia, almost 50%, more than double. Without any commercial activity in the UK, people had already heard of AirAsia. Fast forward that to 2009, the first month we started flying to London, already 48% of our passengers were ex-UK Europe. Normally, if you go to a new country, a new market, a new continent, it will take you a year to build up that brand awareness for someone to say, who is this new airline, then do I trust them, or so normally, for example, let's say we open for sale, right? The first few months, it's mainly the Malaysians, because they're the ones familiar with our brand. They know how to buy sales, whereas people in the new market, they wait, is these guys for real? By the time 3-4 days later after talking, they go on the website, all the sales seats are gone. It's a hoax, right? But the strength of the global brand meant that we had immediate brand conversion, and that's priceless. If you think about it, Sydney, it's the same case. First time ever for AirAsia X. First time we launched Sydney, 55% of our seats were bought by people from here. Right? Normally, it's the opposite, but people were already familiar with the brand. Right? And so, and for the first time, yesterday, is it yesterday? Time flies so fast. Yesterday, we arrived. The first flight leaving Sydney had more passengers than the first flight arriving from Sydney. In fact, the first Sydney to KL flight was 376 out of 377, practically 100% full. Never before Because normally what happens, the first flight, the Malaysians come, first flight, right? Because they're the ones who are buying all the seats. And then it takes a few days later before they are flying back. So the first 2, 3, 4 flights leaving the destination is usually like 60%, maybe 70% full. But this one, the very first flight, that means it couldn't have been people who flew on the first flight from KL. Because that plane turned around in 1 hour. So it's literally people from here going over. Right? And that's demand that we create because of all the activities. And to me, branding is not something where you say, okay, how much is QPR going to give me? How much is Manchester United going to give me? It's, ultimately, if you really want to focus on it, I would focus on not so much whether you can directly relate it to sales, but the talkability, the buzz that gets generated. For the same reason, we sponsored the Oakland Raiders. People thought, Azran, you're crazy, you don't even fly to the UK. You don't even fly to the US. And the Oakland Raiders, they're not even good. But people talk about that, right? Someday when we fly to the US, interestingly, after that, the number of Americans who are AirAsia Facebook fans jumped up. Now these are guys, we may not be flying to the US for another 5 years. Right? But by the time we're there, the seed has already been planted, the awareness is there, people are familiar with the AirAsia brand. So we're big believers generally with lead with the brand. Because we believe that branding over the next 5 years is going to be so much more important for businesses than it ever was the last 50 years. Right? Because nowadays you think about how brands engage with consumers directly. Right? So you don't need market research anymore. Right? If something is wrong, flight delay, this phone buzzing with people saying, oh, you're crap, you're blah, 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 blah. I know about it directly. I don't even need to have my team tell me. Right? So when people can engage directly with CEOs and with businesses, that brand relationship becomes very strong. And that also means if you're leading an organization, you've got to be prepared to be part of that brand. You've got to go on. And you've got to take the good and the bad. Right? You've got to deal with it. You can't delegate it. You can't say, oh, that's my marketing team's job. You've got to be part of that. That's brand.
About the A350. Okay. And then one thing that you said just now about the corporation in Malaysia. I've been working in design.
I'm not going to answer that directly because in terms of our organization, it's exactly what we said in terms of the culture, the openness, the transparency. But let me just take your point on Malaysia Airlines, right? A lot of questions. I mean, this is a burning issue with the blogs and saying all kinds of crap. Let's step back, right? Step back and look at it from a strategic perspective. The issues there, to me, is interesting because what Malaysia Airlines is facing is very similar to what Malaysia is facing. And I call this the nutcracker effect. You're caught in the middle. In any business, there are only two sustainable business positions to be in. Either you are the mass market leader, you have the lowest cost, you've got scale, you are a price leader, lowest price. So in retail, you're Walmart, you're McDonald's, right? Or you are the premium end, right? So you're Singapore Airlines, you're Gucci, you're Porsche, right? So either you've got big scale, lowest cost, or premium, right? So you have high cost, but you have higher price, and you can make a margin. The people who are in the middle are the ones who stop. Malaysia Airlines trying to compete with AirAsia, their cost is 9 cents, ours is 3.5 cents. What happens when they also do everyday low fares, right? Look at the losses that they start accumulating. On the other hand, if they don't invest in their product quality, their planes get older, how are you going to compete with Singapore Airlines and get the same price premium? Same thing with Malaysia. We're stuck in the middle, right? We can't win on low-cost manufacturing anymore because there's China, and as China goes up, there's Vietnam, there's Indonesia, which are much lower cost. On the high end, there's Singapore, Taiwan, Korea. So how do you compete? Ultimately, you cannot stay in the middle. The middle is where you will lose. The middle is where you're attacked both ways. So you have to make a choice. Either you think you can go and become the low cost, go to the low cost position. That means you have to be prepared to slash 60% of your cost, or you go that way. The key thing for the collaboration with Malaysia Airlines is mainly make a decision. Do not stay in the middle. They could very well go, compete with AirAsia, but be prepared to slash 60% of your costs. Right? That's hard. Competing with Singapore Airlines, that's also hard. Tough decision, but you got to do it. So at least now they're saying, okay, we will, get new planes. They started ordering planes. They have, better seats, and it will take them 3-4 years to do so. Now, the problem is they can do that on their own. At least they have clear strategy. But if you look at their finances right now, at the rate, the losses that they're making, by the end of the year they'll go bankrupt. So the advantage of potentially collaborating with AirAsia was find ways to give them extra cash for them to survive, because there's a lot of cost savings initiatives. For example, right, they've got a big expensive hangar. Right now, AirAsia X, we send our planes to Lufthansa Techniques. Right now, if Mars can give me a better price than Lufthansa, I can save money. I'll send my planes to Mars. Mars has underutilized hangar, then they'll get extra revenue. Same opportunities in training, pilot simulators, catering, and all that. By the way, none of these initiatives has been implemented. So because the collaboration says we need to have the approval of the new competition commission. So people say, Mars losing money, collaboration doesn't work. Actually, the collaboration hasn't started. You sign an agreement, but until the competition commission approves it, you cannot implement any of these things. Right? So that's basically the intent of that collaboration. And it's interesting. Someone says, you're pulling out of Europe. Are you, ganging up with MS so that they get to fly? Actually, if you think about it, AirAsia X now has even more routes that overlap head-to-head with MS. Right? Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Taipei, Tokyo, Osaka, Seoul, all the cities that we want to fly to, MS flies too. So it's not about, you fly here, I fly there. So it's there's never been a focus on choosing which markets. It's really about they need to focus on the Singapore Airlines way. They could very well choose to be a low cost, but it's going to be painful if you want to cut 60% of 20,000, like 12,000 people out of 20,000. That's not very nice, right? But you have to, because AirAsia, right, has bigger market cap than Malaysia Airlines with 9,000 people as opposed to 20,000 people. Right? That's the kind of productivity. So if you're not prepared to do that, you better find a way to become a premium airline, because staying in the middle is disastrous. And we as a country also have to decide, because if we stay where we are right now, we will get squeezed. So what are we going to do to get up that curve? Or are we as Malaysians, we say, let's cut all of our salaries by half so that we can cost compete with Indonesia? Would you rather do that?
I've got quite a generic question, but might be good. In terms of what keeps you up at night, like in terms of AirAsia or personal or whatever it is, what keeps you up at night? Because we've talked about political stuff, but what really concerns you for the board?
Besides my lack of hair, I worry less about the external challenges, fuel prices, crashing economies, because they affect everyone in the industry. There, we just out-execute the others. What I worry about is the secret sauce to AirAsia is that culture. And as we grow, the biggest challenge is how do you ensure those cultures and those values still exist? Because today we're in multiple countries, we've got people from all over the world. We're so far away. We used to know everyone in AirAsia X, by name, and everybody is in the same room. But now we've got people in Australia, we've got people in Europe, we've got people in Japan, we've got people in China, we've got flight attendants from the Middle East, everywhere, right? And everyone's flying all over the place. So when people are communicating less, suddenly, is the culture going to break down? Right? How do you still pass on that same spirit to the next 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people that come? That's tough. That's tough. That's what I worry about.
And this last one. Earlier in your presentation, you actually said like AirAsia doesn't believe in having a plan or strategy, but there must be like AirAsia X must have some sort of like a goal or ultimate plan that you want to reach. So what's your opinion there? And if there is a plan, what is the target that AirAsia X will be achieving in its future?
Okay, just to clarify, when I say don't have a plan, doesn't mean we just, okay, tomorrow let's come up whatever we're doing, right? We have a purpose, right? So we want to fly all around the world. We have very specific goals, right? $1 billion, 2 US available seat kilometer, 3 out of 4 hours in the air, 4 out of every 5 seats. Those are very, very clear. How we get there changes. But to me, if you ask me, the big picture, how we're going to get there, I have no idea. But what I do know is there's an opportunity to create a completely new global airline model, one which nobody has really even dreamt about. And that is what happens when you combine a short-haul LCC with a long-haul LCC and build an interconnected network. First, the challenge with the industry is that airlines traditionally were national airlines, one base trying to fly everywhere from one point. Economics will tell you that if you've got multiple points, right, you are exponentially more connected. Right? So if you've got 4 dots, the number of lines you can draw between any 2 dots is much more than if you had 2 dots or 3 dots, right? And as you go 5, 6, it actually grows on an exponential basis. So you can, by creating a global network, you're much more powerful. Now, the problem is, well, airlines have thought about it. The way they were going to do it is through alliances. One World, Star Alliance, SkyTeam. Problem with that, remember, is brand. You don't say, I'm flying Star Alliance, because the airlines don't want to lose their brand sovereignty. You know, we are Singapore Airlines, we are Lufthansa, we are United. Nobody wants to give up the brand. But brands are going to be very important from a customer point of view. Where we see with AirAsia is pioneering a model where instead of just being limited to one country and having one hub, you have multiple hubs around the world. Right? And so while we've done it successfully in Southeast Asia, to the point where, would you believe that AirAsia de facto today is the second largest airline in Singapore after SIA, bigger than Tiger Airways and Jetstar based in Singapore. We don't have a license in Singapore, but we have so many hubs, right? Penang, Langkawi, KL, Kota Kinabalu, Kuching, Bali, Jakarta, Surabaya, Medan, Bandung, Phuket, Bangkok, everywhere flying into Singapore, you actually start to have more hubs. So if you can do that in Southeast Asia, you can do that around the world. And because we've now figured out how do you have the long-haul arm that connects the different networks. So you're now starting to see the first part of that with AirAsia Japan. Right? You still do partnerships. In this case, we've done it with ANA, but what doesn't change is the brand. It must be AirAsia, it must be AirAsia.com, because that's powerful. That's where the customers come in. Right? And so it's not a big stretch of the imagination to then say, wow, you know, if we had an AirAsia Middle East, flying around the Middle East, but an AirAsia X Middle East to fly to Africa, you know, in Europe you can do Madrid to Rio de Janeiro to the US. You know, you can link it up that way through a different model where the brand becomes key. You know, the customer interface is singular, the brand experience is AirAsia rather than, you know, multiple different brands. Yet a complete partnership model through the joint venture structure that allows us to overcome bilateral right restrictions, foreign ownership restrictions. And you know, if you look at that, that's a completely new global airline model that no one's thinking about. Because the legacy carriers are focused on their alliances, and the low-cost carriers, the Ryanairs and Southwest, are only focused on short haul. So we have an opportunity to be a completely new global airline. And I think, you know, that to me is something I'm very excited about, to really build something that no one else has built globally. You know, so that's beyond AirAsia X, phase 3. Right? And so how are we going to get there? Which countries are going to be first? You know, I have no idea. You know, suddenly next year, you know, China change of leadership, hard landing, you know, we have to completely change. You know? Or Australia, another one. You know, what happens if the Aussie dollar tanks, a new government? Who knows? You've got to be prepared to be flexible and adapt and move. But you have a very clear purpose and a big picture that you go for. Yeah, sure, quick one.
Is it alright?
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to thank you for like mapping Malaysia in the world map again through AirAsia X. And secondly, I would like to know, like, for us youngsters, which of course is like 90% over here, would there be any motivational
I'm still
words?
young. Sorry.
Yeah, that's why you, I'm in awe of you. I like you're like a model for you, a role model for your people. And then would there be any motivational words for us so that we will become successful like you? Are there any challenges that we should take?
That's what I hopefully was trying to say over the last class. But again, just to
Any
simplify.
powerful words, any simple, powerful words.
Thank you, everyone. If you got any more questions, just send it to me on Facebook.
All right, give it a round of applause to